All right, welcome to NCSA Live. My name is Kyle Winters, recruiting manager here at NCSA, and I am joined today by the always electrifying Danny Koenig. How are you today, Danny?
I'm good, man. I'm actually feeling a little bit better. We're getting through February. We're closer to warmer weather. I left the office at 6 yesterday. It was still a little light.
There's still a little bit of light.
I felt okay about that.
And what was the temperature?
Oh, I didn't look. I stopped looking.
It was probably a solid like 28.
It was
so
cold.
When we're closer to a little bit warmer weather, we have like 6 months here in Chicago still. But thanks for joining us today on NCSA Live. If you guys have questions, make sure you're throwing them into Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. We're on a few different platforms, but we're going to go through a couple topics here, talk a little bit more about some of the recruiting process, and then get to your questions at the end. So if you have questions about our topic, obviously feel free to throw those in, but if you have questions otherwise about anything in recruiting, add those and we'll go through those at the end as well. But today I think is, in my mind, almost the most important topic that a family could know about or go over or have any sort of insight to when it comes into recruiting, and that's how to contact college coaches. It's contacting college coaches in the first place. I know when I was in high school, I didn't even know you were supposed to do that. I didn't know that was a thing you could do. I don't know about you, but I think that's supremely important these days.
Yeah, it seems a little bit weird because the idea of being recruited, it almost has this passive sense to it. But that's not really what it's about. It's about relationship building. So yeah, I think you're right. It's right up there with identifying a target list of schools, contacting college coaches, and maybe knowing the timeline. I mean, it's one of the most important things that you're going to deal with. So what we're talking about is, in general terms today, contacting college coaches. And we're actually going to do this in a little bit of a series because we want to try and get a little bit more specific about this if we can. So today we're talking in slightly general terms, how to contact college coaches, kind of the who, what, when, where, why, how.
Not necessarily in that order.
I don't think so, but we could, right, if we remember what the order was. So, why should I be reaching out to college coaches? We're going to cover that. Who do I reach out to? If you're a kicker, you're not necessarily going to contact the head coach. Right? When, right? We're going to touch on timeline again, one of those all-important things to understand here in the timeline. How? What are we doing? What should we be doing? How does this go down, right? Do you pick up the phone, get the old rotary dial going, say, hey, coach, I'm interested? Probably not initially, right? So we're going to discuss.
Day one, first grade, call the coach.
Just
call them up.
Assert your dominance early in elementary school. They'll remember you forever. So, we're touching on a lot of different things here, and admittedly, we're going to be skimming some of this stuff. Because we do want to get some of your questions. Please put some questions in there below. We can be talking about how to contact college coaches, some things a little bit more specific to you guys. So again, we're across all these platforms as well. If you have something specific and you want to talk about your student athlete in particular, we have an email set up for that. It is live@ncsasports.org. That's if you're looking for a little bit more personalized attention. So let's get to it here. So why would we ever do this? Why would we ever contact a college coach?
Yeah, it's a great question to start with, and honestly, it's something that probably, again, I don't think most families necessarily know. The old school mentality behind recruiting is that if you're good enough, college coaches will find you. Probably it was the way it was for a long time. This day and age, that's not necessarily the case. There are hundreds of thousands of athletes in each sport. For football, there are over 1 million high school football players in the country. So to be recognized by a college coach, it's incredibly difficult. Coaches aren't necessarily going to just happen across the best athletes. There are thousands of athletes every year who are good enough, who are smart enough to be athletes in college that college coaches don't find. So first and foremost, so college coaches can find you. I would say that's probably the biggest and main reason is that you're one person in a sea of a lot of other people. You're a face in a crowd, needle in a haystack. If you want a coach to know who you is, know who you are, you need to be proactive.
Reach out. And I guess from a college coach's perspective, what that really means is that person has their act together. They know what they should be doing. They know that they could be doing this. And they've identified your program as a top program for them. That's pretty attractive, right? It takes a lot of the legwork out of it. It takes a lot of guesswork out of it. So why you would reach out to that college coach? Set yourself apart, right? And not only is that expected of college coaches, it's preferred. College coaches are really looking for student athletes to do that. And, we'll touch on the timeline, but you really can't start that early enough. There are times when coaches can't get back to you, but you need to do that because they are expecting that. And like you had said, I mean, unless you are the cream of the crop, 99.99% of student athletes need to take some initiative here.
Yeah, it's not necessarily, and we'll talk again about the timeline here in a little bit, but it's not necessarily based on around the contact dates of when coaches can reach out to you that you should be reaching out to coaches. It's not like these college coaches are just waiting till the first day they can contact a student athlete to take off their blinders and decide, okay, now I'm going to start looking at this class.
Right.
No, they start looking at these student athletes immediately freshman year in a lot of cases, sometimes younger than that, as young as 7th and 8th grade. So for your student athlete to be on the same pace as other student athletes who are getting looked at that age, it's really incumbent on the family. It's up to you guys to be the ones who are reaching out to these coaches, promoting them, marketing them, getting them exposure to these coaches early and often, and throughout the course of high school as well, updating them as they go on. You don't want to just email a coach one time, say, work's done,
Sure.
I emailed a coach, I'm good now.
Sure.
It's a process that you need to continue and update and really be active throughout the entirety of high school.
Sure. So we've kind of we're into the timeline aspect of it a little bit, right? And we said kind of why you should be doing this to help yourself stand apart. But again, you can't start this stuff early enough.
Right.
And we see the roster openings. So college coaches come to us and say, hey, we know we're going to have roster openings in this particular grad year at these positions. Help us fulfill those. Send us recruits that you have that fit that mold. So we've started to see them for the class of 2025.
Oh, yeah.
Those are 7th graders. All right, so they're starting to take some preemptive looks at, okay, which of these pieces of talent may develop into something that's going to be a good fit for my program. Eventually, not only are college coaches in competition for the best athletes, they're in competition with other coaches who also want the best athletes. When there is money involved, there is scholarship, and they have this timeline to work with, they squeeze every bit of juice out of it that they can. So, the timeline, again, for the families and what we're trying to articulate, you need to be proactive, and you need to be proactive early. Because we do have coaches asking us for 7th graders, and that's just the reality of it. We talk to a lot of families that want to go D1. They want to earn a scholarship. Well, you better be running with the D1 scholarship coach's timeline, or else you're going to you're going to fall behind. And that's pretty well documented. 247 Sports, Top Drawer. They're pretty good about reporting.
There's the commitments out there and offers for student athletes going out, freshmen.
You can see this stuff.
8th grade, yeah.
Yeah, it's out there and it's happening. And if you choose to ignore that, you put yourself at a little bit of risk. So again. We're starting early. We're communicating effectively, right? So we know why we're doing this, but how? What's kind of the proper method? I mean, at least initially. So let's just say you're a freshman. Pretty sure you want to play in college. You want to go play some college baseball. Maybe have a loose target list, maybe like 50 schools. Where do you start? How do you start this process?
Well, I mean, you got to figure out how to get to that coach in the first place. So there's a couple different ways you can do that. One way is kind of what I would deem the old-fashioned way. You would go to each of those schools, look up the email address for the coaches at that program, and try to email them individually one by one. Sounds tedious. Sounds like it might be a lot of work. We actually have a message center as well at NCSA where families can go in. They have a database of every coach in the country for their sport, and then go email their email coaches across the country directly through their profile. Either way, you're going to need to start with an email to the coach. That's going to be the first step for almost every student athlete in this process, is just sending out an introduction email to that coach, documenting who you are, why you're emailing them, why you're interested in them, that school specifically, not something generic. I would probably throw in a little bit of information about that school, about that coach, to let them know that you're actually talking to them, not everyone, and let them know about your interests, to introduce yourself to that coach in the first place. That's a great starting point for any student athlete to start getting your foot in the door a little bit.
Sure, and I think in general terms, again, we're talking about if you were to start this pretty early, there will be an evolution. Right? Eventually, it's not just going to be kind of generic information. Coaches will ask you. You can feel free to send your tournament schedule, updated game film, whatever. So I think for the most part, that intro email can happen early. It should happen early. It should be directed. It should be specific to that school, but at the same time, pretty brief. In a lot of cases with the scholarship programs, they can't get back to you anyway. Right? So they're not going to sit there and read your whole life story and look at 10 full games of film that you've sent over. Probably a nice gesture, shows that you've got your act together, but realistically an intro email in the subject line, this is basically who I am, at a glance. In the body of that, tell that coach why you're interested in their program. Really differentiate yourself. Say, hey, coach, I've done my research. I'm on top of my game. I'm someone that you should be paying attention to. And then if you have that NCSA profile, put the link in there. It's literally going to house all the information academically and athletically, your tournament schedule, your video. that coaches need to see. And it's kind of one-stop shopping for them, which is a pretty good goal for anybody.
If you email through NCSA, your link is automatically included within that.
That's
so
right,
it's
and you can track that. So, again, early, often, being smart about that, keep it brief. There will be an evolution to this. So,
one thing we can probably jump into, I would say, we jumped around a little bit, but you mentioned it before. Who do I contact?
Correct.
We can look at that from two different facets, and that can probably go back to how do I develop that list, but also like what coaches do I actually specifically reach out to at that program. So you're a former college coach yourself. When it came to your guys' recruiting, obviously swimming's a little bit different, but what is it that you saw as a college coach? How was the preference in your guys' program that you wanted student athletes to reach out to you, to the head coach, the assistant, to the grad assistant? Who was it that you were specifically looking for them to reach out to?
yeah, I would say swimming's a little bit different because we didn't carry a staff.
You don't have
often.
different event coaches?
I mean, at times. So there's different distance coaches, and usually at your bigger D1s, you have a whole staff of people, maybe 5 people, maybe a couple graduate assistants, right? For football, you're going to have a staff of like a dozen.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy, right? They carry big staffs. There's video people, recruiting people, position coaches, right? Operations guys. So for me in swimming, a lot of times it was just me and the head coach, and really you could reach out to either of us, although I was doing a lot of that stuff, kind of organizing on the back end. But if you do have multiple opportunities, you want to try and get as specific as possible to your event, right? Your distance,
Position.
yeah, your position, and then again, put yourself in the position of that coach who is most likely to receive that information and kind of deal with recruits. Sometimes it's spelled out in plain writing on their site. We have a recruiting coordinator or the head of recruiting. That's obviously who that would go to. But in the case of smaller staffs, probably get it to everybody. In a slightly larger staff, try and get it specific to what it is that you do or what that coach is doing to deal with recruits.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's not going to hurt if every coach and staff gets your email, gets your profile, gets your video. It's not going to hurt if it does that. But at the end of the day, as well, a lot of head coaches aren't doing that initial recruiting, identifying prospects, some of those types of things. And as far as like what schools, there's a lot that goes into that. There's as a young student athlete, probably you want to cast a wide net to as many schools as you possibly can, but be realistic as well. Know where you maybe fit in. Talk with your coaches and see where they think you may fit in. Look at that roster. Do you look like someone that's on that roster? When you watch them play, does it look like you? Are you built the same way as them? So there's a lot of different factors that you can go in there, but at the end of the day, the wider the net you cast, the more opportunities you're going to have. So be open with that. Reach out to a lot of schools, a lot of levels, a lot of different programs just across the board. Really from there, we can talk about when we can get more specifically into that timeline. We talked about the timeline as far as like there's never such thing as starting too early, but we could probably talk a little bit more about when can they contact
Yeah,
us.
and I mean it's a lot about what's permissible based on the NCAA, and that will change by sport. We can't go through it all right now. Again, if you have specific questions, hit us up by email, get to us on social media. We will get back to you. But so again, you're starting early, you have your target list, you've drafted this intro email, you know what you should be doing. At some point that evolves, and at some point those coaches can get back to you, and it's not just going to be by emailing. Right, at some point, electronic communications opens up by way of text, direct messages on social media, and then the other big one is phone calls, which for me as a coach was a huge point when I was able to reach out to student athletes directly. Everything I was doing before that official contact period led into when I could actually make that phone call. Phone calls are real. If you're being called by a college coach when they're able to do that, they're pretty interested in you. So again, there is a difference between an early email and kind of just going back and forth to set up an official visit or to communicate maybe tournament schedules. What you should be pushing for is to get that college coach on the phone. And that's really only possible once the official contact period opens up for your sport. Check the site. Sorry, I wish I could give you guys better information because it is different. For most D2s, June 15th, a lot of sports September 1st. Some sports at the Division I level, it is June 15th. So go to our website, check out your specific sport. It'll outline in very plain terms what that contact period is, but your goal is to be receiving phone calls from college coaches.
Yeah, and we should note that for student athletes, we didn't necessarily talk about it specifically, but there's really no restrictions on you and when you can start reaching out to a college coach. So I wanted to make that elaboration that you guys can start reaching out to college coaches really at any time. You guys can make phone calls anytime. You can email coaches really starting at any time, those coaches can't necessarily contact you back at the Division I and Division II level till specific dates. That being said, if you were to call a Division II coach, they can pick up the phone. They can answer that as a freshman in high school. Most sports with some of the new NCAA contact rules, their contact date starts on June 15th for Division I, Division II schools, where they can start having phone calls. They can start making scholarship offers. They can do really everything starting on June 15th. There are, like Danny said, still some outliers that wait till September 1st of junior year, but it's going to be specific towards the individual sport. Football different,
hockey different.
Hockey's very different. So there are some outliers within there, but that's why we talk about getting to know all of this information very early in the process. That way, when those dates are coming, you're prepped, you're ready for them. You know what to do when they're coming up. That way you're on track and can be making steps. You can be taking action and making moves when these dates are coming up.
Correct. So a couple other things that I think we should just touch on here briefly. We've talked about emails. That's probably going to be your primary driver for a lot of this. The goal being eventually you want that college coach to call you, get on the phone, start building that relationship. There is some importance placed on social media. Probably not the most efficient way to go about recruiting, but it is part of it. With video or communicating certain things to college coaches. Coaches don't love that because it's a little bit slippery, right? Tough to grasp. You don't know much about that kid. You might like what they see, but who knows? Maybe they're not that good in the classroom. So social media is okay. Don't rely on that. The other way is text messages. Pretty much just a means of getting to where you want to be. So text messages, when I would use that, when I could, I would reach out by text, say, hey, found your information, would love to pick up a conversation.
Yeah, as far as the text message goes, you're probably not going to be able to just text a coach. You're not going to have their cell phone right off the bat.
No.
That's going to be a situation where the coach gave you their phone number and said, hey, this is the number I text from. Text me back.
Sure, yeah. Want to hear from you. Would love to set up a phone call. Would love to invite you to campus. Let's get something going. Or just logistics. Hey, you're coming on an official visit. Tour starts at 1. Where are you guys? We're in the athletics, whatever. Text messages isn't really for relationship building. It's more for logistics. Social media, not a really efficient way.
Social media is great. We talk to a lot of families who talk about, I put my highlight video up on Instagram. That's great. That's awesome. Think about how many other people are on Instagram. There's billions of Instagrams. There's billions of Twitters, Facebooks, everything, YouTube pages across the world. And it's going to be very difficult for a coach to find you directly via social media. So not a bad thing by any means, but probably you're going to want a more directed way of getting to these coaches.
I guess
that's where we come in.
To a degree, what we do is sort of social media.
Yeah.
I mean, it is. It's basically like a Facebook page or a LinkedIn page, but specifically for athletically related content and academics, which a lot of these college coaches can't find academics through regular social media channels. So, email is going to be your primary driver. You can do that early on. One-way street, that's always open, right? You need to get after it early. You need to have a game plan. You need to understand the rules. You need to be proactive, right? Do not sit back and wait for college coaches to reach out to you once the official contact period happens, because if they don't know you exist before then, odds are they're not reaching out and offering that scholarship. So take initiative with it. Be smart about how you go about that. Understand what the rules are for your sport, and you probably will find a pretty high level of success.
Yeah. It'll be much better than sitting around waiting and hoping that things just happen to work out for you. We speak with thousands of athletes every day, every week, every month, every year who are at that point, junior, senior year, where they've been just assuming that coaches were going to find them, and it doesn't always work out that way. It does every now and then, but I wouldn't put it a chance. So
correct.
Great summary. We're kind of like a social media platform, except nobody posts on NCSA about brooms standing up on their own on a random day in February. Did you see this?
Whoa, I missed that entirely.
A bunch of posts yesterday about how brooms were standing up on their own. I don't know what that's all about. But we'll jump into some of your guys' questions here. And like I said, if you have anything, post it in Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube, and we'll try to get to as many as we can here. But Kelly James said, first off, that she's looking forward to this episode.
All right, Kelly.
So are we, Kelly.
Happy to have you here.
But she said, my daughter received a message from a coach today. Today, actually, what type of things should she include in her response email to him? And so it's hard for us to answer that specifically. It depends on sport, grad year, what the coach said. Did they ask you guys questions? There's a lot of different things that can go into that. But Danny, if you want to talk about,
I would say number one,
that,
is your daughter interested in that program? It is okay to say no. Coaches just want to know either way, right? So if you are interested, tell them why you're interested. Hey, coach, appreciate the message. Didn't know much about your school. Turns out you have my major. Similar players, that I might fit in well. Happy that you're reaching out. And if the time is right, set up a time for a phone call. right? I know we're coming into spring break time for a lot of families. They're starting to set up unofficial visits over their spring break, right? Ideally, you're getting to that point. So if she is genuinely interested, express that interest and why you're interested, right? That coach is doing a little bit of fishing to see if you are interested. And if not, it's okay. Just don't waste that coach's time. Say, hey, coach, looked it up. I'm looking to go into nursing. Unfortunately, you guys don't do nursing. I really do appreciate you reaching out, but unfortunately, I'm going to possibly look at other opportunities.
And if you don't have those specifics, I would say be open. Be open to the different
Sure.
opportunities out there. The wider your list is, the more opportunities you're going to have. So I would encourage people to be open to different opportunities as well. You don't necessarily need to write a coach or program off right away.
Cool.
Judy's at work. Will you include a link so we can watch later? Yeah, it'll be on the NCSA page. There'll be a link right in. It'll be built right into our page there. You'll see it. Melissa, kind of exclamatory, 7th grade question mark.
Ooh.
The coach could be gone by the time they're looking to sign. You're absolutely right. That's a huge aspect in this recruiting process, is just knowing that there is a lot of turnover with these college coaches at this day and age. So it's really going to be more beneficial for you guys to be as active as possible, for you to have all of your ducks in a row in case, God forbid, 2-3 years down the road, this coach leaves. And now you're in junior or senior year, and you have to figure out a new plan. That's why we talk about all these things, be prepared for that type of scenario where things don't go how they're supposed to go.
Spoke with a family yesterday, senior volleyball player, had a scholarship to a Division I program. The coach left and derailed everything. Now she's going out to pick up the pieces, looking for alternative opportunities, panicking a little bit, I think understandably so.
Yeah.
But, I just gave her every reassurance. I said, look, we still have college volleyball programs with roster openings in the 2020 grad class. No problem. Some of those are D1, D2. You can still get that scholarship. A lot of what she was looking for, those programs fit what she was after. And again, not an easy situation to deal with, but the messaging there being like, it's still possible. It happens. It's unfortunate. I never stayed anywhere longer than 4 years. It shouldn't preclude you from, waiting until you're in a great spot. Ideally, you're having those communications junior, senior year. Everything is good. But even if you're a 7th grader, don't worry about where a coach is going to be in 5-6 years.
Yeah, last thing that you want, and the last thing that we want for you guys, is to be 2-3 years down the road and feeling like you're lost, or now all of a sudden you have to completely start over again. That's the last thing you want. It happens to a lot of student athletes, but if you have your profile, you're updating it, you're keeping all that information really current, relevant, it's not going to be starting over. It's going to be a slight shift or adjustment.
Sure.
So the more you can be prepared for the unexplained, the unexpected, that same can be said for like injuries that come up. Nobody's planning for an injury, but they happen. And last thing you want is to be, oh, now I have 6 months, a year off, and I have to start from scratch, whereas you could be in a better place going into that before.
Yeah.
Awesome. We have some updates here. If it's a quiet period or dead period, can you still send an email during that time? Student athletes of 2022, so D1 wouldn't be able to respond. Anyways, Jen, probably should clarify a little bit right there. 2022s, the D1 coaches can't respond. That being said, depending on the sport, that doesn't mean they can't be talking to a student athlete that age. Sports like football, sports like baseball, they can have conversations. They can, if a student athlete picks up the phone, they can call that coach and they can speak with a 2022 graduate for as long as they want. Some sports you can't do that. But to get back to your point, yeah, you guys absolutely can email during all those periods. Those periods more refer to what the coach can be doing. It's not as much about what a student athlete can or cannot be doing as far as contact rules go.
Right.
Dead period, quiet period.
Yep,
such.
and that's just where you need to be up on the rules and know what's permissible. So, yeah.
For sure. Caroline, Kate Skinner, 2022 volleyball player. She was told she could call D2 and down right now, but June 15th for D1. Is that correct? That's exactly correct. You guys can call a Division I coach. That being said, a Division I coach in volleyball cannot answer and talk to you and have a conversation until June 15th after sophomore year going into junior year. So in that sense, they can't. That being said, you can call a Division II school coach, and if you've already built up rapport, you've already had some sort of connection with them, they can answer that call. They can have that conversation with you guys. Again, it goes back to the fact that there's no real restrictions on student athletes and what you guys can do in this process.
Sure. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's a great answer.
Especially for volleyball. Volleyball is a sport that starts very early. Coaches start looking very young in the recruiting process, especially at the higher levels. Jennifer Duffy, lacrosse. I'm not sure. I guess that's maybe a continuation of the same question. Lacrosse is a little bit different. They have a different standard of rules. They have to wait till September 1st, Division I schools. Division II schools, June 15th. So a little bit more of the standard there. Volleyball, same thing. Let's see, Tracy, my 2021 volleyball player has a big tournament this weekend, and one of the coaches that is following her will be there and will be watching her. I would think she might approach my daughter to talk to her. I think I can see where this is going. You know, what should she be prepared to maybe talk about at that tournament? If you want to elaborate that,
yeah,
again,
I don't think.
Talk to coaches.
I mean, coaches, they understand that you're there to play at that time, and a lot of times what coaches will do is just talk to parents. And it's really just kind of relationship building. Again, they're not going to grill you. They're not going to ask for film or transcripts on hand, anything like that. So really, you know, that coach just wants you to know that they're there, right? And if they come up and say something, it's going to be pleasantries for the most part. Hey, really liked your game. Really like this and that about it. Maybe they would invite you to campus, but again, they don't want to be a distraction at that point. The messaging for them, number one, they're just trying to see how you are in action. Number two, they want you to know that they're there as well.
Yeah, if they're following her, that's a really good thing. I was a coach for club softball for years. It's similar in that sense that the coach, if they're going to talk to them in person, they might come up and say hi. They might say, hi, how you doing? How are things? Move on. They're not going to have a whole in-depth conversation. I would say for you guys, it's probably going to be a good idea to come up with some questions you maybe want to ask that coach. You can ask about the program, about the student athletes, how their season's going, what they're doing on their end. There's a lot of different things you guys can be asking them, but I wouldn't expect too much out of that conversation. They're not going to have an in-depth recruiting conversation on site, especially considering that there's maybe going to be 100 teams there. There might be 1,000 players in this tournament. They're not going around trying to talk to every single student athlete there. So to have a little preparation, but also don't stress over it too much. Have your student athlete focus on just going out and having a great time playing really well.
Yeah, that's it.
Those are the big keys.
And that's what the coach wants for you as well. So,
absolutely. Angela asked about track. Should videos be sent to coaches from your previous year? Outdoor season has not started in Central Texas. And track's a little bit unique. Swimming's a little bit unique as well, where track video is really not the most important facet of recruiting. Coaches are going to look mostly at your times. They may want to look at your running form a little bit, but at the end of the day, if you're fast, you're fast. That's what it comes down to.
That's right.
Just showing your video isn't going to necessarily tell them how fast you are, but your times will. So I would say update them with any recent times or your times from last year, and when you get new times, update them this year.
Sure. I don't think video is bad, though. I think it's something extra. Yeah. I kind of liked it as a coach. In some respects, it was like, wow, this kid's pretty fast, and he doesn't have very good technique. So that actually, for me, meant a lot. Hey, I can correct this, and we can get a lot better. But also just as a measure for showing progress. Maybe you were better than you were a year ago, and it's not just because of the times. It's because you've worked on your technique, you've been working with the coach, you got stronger. Again, those things, really the underlying message is, hey, I've worked pretty hard in the off season. Here's how much better I am year to year. So it can't ever hurt. At the end of the day, coaches for track and swimming, they deal with black and white times.
Yeah, and we can probably take two more coaches. Two more questions, and we can probably finish up from there. This relates a little bit, and we're getting a lot of volleyball questions today. It makes sense. We're right in the midst of the club volleyball season.
3 weekends a month.
It's
crazy.
We're in the teeth of it right now. But a daughter's a 2022 volleyball player. Can a college coach speak with her high school or club coach? Can there be any direct communication at these big tournaments? And so that's one of the newer rules that came into place. And we can talk most specifically about D1s in this case, that they cannot have conversations with your guys' club or travel or high school coaches anymore. That used to be something that came up a lot for like softball, volleyball. That would be a way that a lot of these early commitments would happen, is they would talk to coaches. So Division I coaches, they're not technically able to have conversations with the coaches of younger student athletes anymore. That being said, that means you guys have to market yourselves a little bit more and a little bit less reliance maybe on the club coach, though, of course.
Sure.
Have them reach out to those coaches as well.
Yeah, it can't hurt. It raised a lot of questions, especially with the early timeline with softball and volleyball. Okay, well, how are college coaches going to do this? Because it never really stopped them. Some of our partnerships with some of the governing bodies, high-level club for volleyball in particular, USA Volleyball, JVA, ABCA, we became really popular with college coaches because they could track these kids early on without ever having to communicate with a parent or a coach, right? And they would get updates. So if they're following your student athlete's profile, you upload video, that coach gets it right away. And I think for the benefit for the parents and their athletes at the time when they can't really get a sense for which of these coaches are interested, they can actually see that through our system. Which of these coaches are actually following the profile? Who's opening their email, right? So you start to read between the lines like, hey, these people are genuinely interested in what I'm doing. And then when that time of contact comes, you're pretty well prepared and kind of get a sense for who's in there. So it did raise a lot of questions, but we did our best to kind of keep up with that and the demand for college coaches. A lot of the partnerships with the governing bodies at the club level were really, really beneficial. So really the benefit goes to the parents and the athletes to get a sense for what's going on long before they can.
For sure. Awesome. Last two things that I want to get here. Jerry's asking about, Kathy is asking about what's better to attend, and she asked about volleyball specifically, and we could probably elaborate this to essentially all sports. When it comes to volleyball camps, showcase camp, ID camp, exposure camp, we can probably really lump all of these into the same category, that they all can be good. At the same time, that being said, they're not necessarily going to be the main way that most student athletes get recruited. I don't know if you can probably elaborate on that a little bit more.
Yeah, and if you've been to some of those things, I mean, it's like 12 different fields and 60 coaches and like 100 teams. I mean, it's really hard to pin one person down. Then of course there's the logistical issue. If you like a student athlete, where do you find them? Like even if you can't communicate with their coach or the parents, like what are you going to do, right? They're just a number and a good-looking ball player on a field. So that's, again, kind of where we came in as the meeting place between a lot of those programs. If you're using those events strictly to get exposure, it's hit or miss. Maybe you have an off game, right? Maybe you're just not performing your best. Maybe you're under the weather. I don't know. Maybe a coach likes you, doesn't know how to find you. There's a lot of question marks that go into that, and there's a lot of time, money, and energy spent on camps and clinics. Right, so we're trying to actually reverse engineer that to where you are identifying schools first, building relationships, communicating interest by email, right? And then figuring out, okay, where are the coaches that I am interested in going to be? And then intentionally make moves to go get in front of those coaches, say, hey, coach, I'm this interested. I'm going to get out in front of where you are this summer. Let me know.
Absolutely, and really just kind of build off that last comment before we go into some of the commitments. What we talk about a lot is really the steps that a student athlete needs to take in the recruiting process, no matter what they're doing. For us, what we talk about, it's not that just by using NCSA, just by having a profile with us on its own, or just by having a membership with NCSA, that all of a sudden coaches are going to flock and all of a sudden you're going to get recruited and get scholarships coming out the wazoo. It doesn't work that way. And nobody at NCSA would tell you that just by signing up with NCSA, all of a sudden you're going to get recruited. That's not the case. Really, it's much more so that these are steps that a student athlete, that a family needs to take in the recruiting process, no matter what their situation. We just happen to talk with families about what they need to be doing individually and what steps they should be taking. Overall, it's really just about the effort and work that a student athlete and a family put into their recruiting process. Our goal is just to make it simpler, more efficient, and hopefully give you guys a better point of direction as to what you can be doing to help yourself. So that's really where we're coming from. That's why we do these, is to make sure that you understand what it is that you guys need to be doing to help yourselves and help your own situations when it comes to the recruiting process.
Yep, self-managed resume, it's a tremendous resource. So for those of you that are with us, it's good. Hopefully
awesome.
You're having a good experience.
Very cool. We'll get to our kind of wrapping it up here with some of our commitments from the week. I'm hoping that you remember, I kind of remember this. We have first commitment of the week, Ethan Kramer. He's a golfer out of Ohio, committed to College of Wooster.
Yes.
Congrats, Ethan.
That's right.
Pulled that one right from the beginning, right from before this.
Good stuff.
Trey Reinsch is another commitment of ours, lacrosse player out of Pensacola, Florida. That's unique. Florida's kind of popping up with lacrosse. I know I've spoken with a lot of families out of Florida that hasn't quite gotten there big yet, but that's really awesome. Committed to University of Montevideo, the Falcons, out of Alabama. It looks like Great Lakes Valley Conference. That's awesome. And last one, Hunter Harris, football player. Hunter, sorry, I didn't have a ton of your background information. We were trying to pull it right before this. We'll make sure to get it out and give you a shout out as well. But those are our 3 commitments for the week. We'll ring the bell for you guys. Anything else you want to add, Danny?
I don't know, man. I'm having a good day.
It's a good day.
Yeah, and next week's going to be good as well, right? So for all the families that are with us, thank you for being here. Thank you for asking questions, engaging with us. We are here. We are genuine experts at what we do. If you have more specific questions, again, reach out to us on social media.
At Coach Danny.
That's right. I'm Coach Danny, NCSA.
At Coach Danny, NCSA.
Okay, well, you almost got it. It's fine. They'll get the message, right? You can reach out to our general Facebook, pages, etc. If you have additional questions, or send an email over to live@ncsasports.org. Right, that is a place where families are submitting their questions specific to their student athlete. If you're looking to learn a little bit more, get a recruiting assessment, get a profile built out, and get connected to college coaches, that is a beautiful place to start. I will be on that here this afternoon and for the rest of the week. So next week, we're pushing this forward. Right, we're going to continue with how to contact college coaches, trying to get as specific with that as possible. Maybe even diving into the email bit a little bit, because that is really important and probably your primary method. So thank you for joining us here today. Be in touch if you have additional questions. Other than that, we will see you guys next week, 2 p.m. Central.